Hey guys, welcome to the last episode of This Week in BJJ for 2014. What is this I'm surrounded by? Only the two bestsellers of the Christmas season. We got Hayla Gracie's Carlos Gracie Sr. book, Creator of a Fighting Dynasty, and today's 3 DVD set, all on guard passing, Favela Jiu-Jitsu. This is great stuff. Now let's get started with the show.
Welcome to This Week in BJJ, the world's first and only live jiu-jitsu show. Brought to you by Defense Soap. Defend what you have built. And Q5 Labs. Stay Alpha. And here's your host, Budo Jake.
So I know most of you guys are jiu-jitsu fans, and thankfully there's a lot of really cool pro events taking place. In January, there's another one. This one is called the Polaris Pro. This one takes place in England, in Wales to be exact, and this one looks like it's going to be a great event. There's going to be 8 matches, and here's who's competing. We got Keenan Cornelius versus Abraham Marte, JT Torres versus Victor Estima, AJ Agazarm versus Ali Geddes, Dean Lister versus Pablo Popovich, Mike Fowler versus Eduardo Telles, Kit Dale versus Victor Silverio, Michelle Nicolini versus Angelica Galvao, and Max Campos versus Dara O'Connell. So any one of those matches would be worth it, in my opinion. And you can see more information at polaris-pro.org. A pay-per-view will be available on January 10th. And let's take a look at a clip of Eduardo Telles for Polaris Pro.
Biggest achievements was the World Tournament No-Gi last year, 2013, and Pan American champion, Brazilian champion. This will be a longer match, no points, just submission. So yeah, I'll be focused on the submission. I'll be focused on not wasting my energy. Really motivates me to train. It's like the sport is evolving all the time. You know, jiu-jitsu, even MMA, it's evolving so much so you don't get bored. You know, it's always something new to learn. It's very exciting. Oh, Mike Fowler, one of the first American black belts. Nice guy. You know, we have a good relation, you know, and I know him from a long time, and he got good jiu-jitsu. I don't see Mike fighting for a long time, so I will not predict that, but I will look forward to submit him. My name is Eduardo Telles. I'm from 99 Jiu-Jitsu and I'm fighting in the first ever Polaris event.
So there's 3 products I need to talk about today. The first one is the Masterclass Spider Guard set by Stefan Kesting and Elliot Bayev. Now, Stefan is known for putting out really high-quality instructional materials, and a lot of the guys that he teams up with are not necessarily the biggest names in competition jiu-jitsu, but what they are known for is excellent teaching ability. And I've seen some clips from Elliot, and it's clear that he knows what he's talking about with the Spider Guard. So if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of Spider Guard experience, I think this DVD set is a great way to develop your Spider Guard game. Masterclass Spider Guard set is available on BudoVideos.com for $97 for a limited time. The price will be going up shortly. Next up is, we talked about this a little while before, the Hala Gracie book. This is the biography that she wrote about her father, Carlos Gracie Sr., which was the first Gracie to learn from Mitsuyo Maeda, the Japanese guy. And as you can see, it's a huge book, over 540 pages, has a lot of great full-color pictures. I haven't made my way through the whole book yet, but man, it is full of information. She spent a long time researching all this stuff, and it's a joy to read. And last but not least, Tereré. This was a project that was near and dear to my heart. I've always been a huge fan of Tereré. If you've seen him compete, you know that he is super exciting, super technical, and as good on top as he is on the bottom, and his takedowns. He's the complete package. And he's also the instructor of Cobrinha and Andre Galvao, just to name a couple. So it was a joy to go to Brazil and film Tereré, and we got his entire game. And the first set that we're releasing is all of his guard passing. Disc 1 is open guard passes. Disc 2 is sitting up guard and butterfly passes. And Disc 3 is half guard and X guard passes. He also talks about the X guard passes he used in 4 of his matches against Marcelo Garcia. So you know this stuff works. It's available on DVD, on demand, on iOS, and also Android apps. So pretty much any format you want, it's available on BudoVideos.com in the Google Play and the App Store. Let's take a look at a sample clip from Tereré's Favela Jiu-Jitsu guard passing. Okay, so another De La Riva guard pass. This time, there's a particular way that I'm going to break his De La Riva grips. The first thing I'm going to do is turn my foot to the side, taking his hook out. This hook is bothering me here, so I grip on his knee, turn my toes to the outside, and take that hook out. Then I step over and place his leg in between my legs. So another pass here, I'm going to reach through in between his legs, and I'm going to cup his thigh. I'm going to open my knee and then bring it on top of his shin. Not his thigh, but his shin. Even if he's still holding my ankle here, I'm going to continue here, driving my knee to the mat. If I stop here, I'm on my toes here, and my hand is on the ground for base. While this hand is on the ground, I'm going to reach over and get the crossface. I'm going to make a big back step, fall to the side, and pull my leg free, come on top, passing the guard. If you're a fan of no-gi jiu-jitsu, then the name Garry Tonon is probably not unfamiliar to you. I was first aware of Garry in the ADCC 2013, the one that took place in China. Garry did great in his division, and he stood up and joined the Absolute division, fighting guys like Cyborg and Buchecha, and he put up great matches. Of course, you probably remember his match with Kron Gracie. He's going to be on the show, and we're going to talk to him about all that stuff, but I think he has a great future ahead of him. He's super exciting, he's super humble, and it's a joy to have him in the jiu-jitsu world. So here we go. Let's chat with Garry Tonon. Hey guys, welcome back to This Week in BJJ. Today, I'm very happy to have Garry Tonon on the show. Garry, thanks for coming in today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
A lot of you guys watching out here know that Garry had, in my opinion, the best match at Metamoris 5. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But beforehand, I want to talk about the first time I came across you. You know, there's so many guys in the lower belts, I mean, before black belt, competing in the IBJJF tournaments. It's hard to keep up to date with all of them. I know you were competing quite a bit, but it was Lloyd Irvin's Kumite that I saw you, the brown belt Kumite. So many standouts in that tournament.
Yes.
Let's talk about that for a minute. How was that experience at the Kumite?
It was the most unique experience at the time, for sure, in my competitive career, because it was completely different. I think that was kind of like one of the earlier offshoots of the idea of having submission-only matches. And, you know, A, wasn't used to competing like that. B, like, you know, wasn't used to just like being away for like a solid, you know, a week-long tournament, as opposed to, you know, you just show up, you compete one day, whatever the case may be. You get a, you know, a couple minutes rest in between each match, and then you're done for the day. You know, this is like day after day, 6 matches, no time limit, sub only each day, except for maybe like the last 2 days. About the same amount of rest that we got in between IBJJ. In fact, I think I got more rest in between IBJJF matches than I did in the Kumite, for sure. Wow. Like, maybe we would get maximum like 10 minutes, unless like for some reason like all the matches that were going at that particular time were were longer, or whatever the case may be. For the most part, 10 minutes between each match. You know, some of us had quicker matches, some of us had longer ones. I think mine probably averaged, you know, about 30 minutes each. So, you know, it was rough. It was rough. That was the first time I ever took ice baths. Like, I'd never really cared too much. I'm pretty young, so I recovered pretty quick. But, like, I was injured and tired, and I needed something extra to help recover. And, yeah, I was taking ice baths every single night.
Right. Because back when that tournament happened, there's quite a big cult of personality around Lloyd at that time. And I was just thinking, the guys that had balls big enough to go into his domain and to compete over a week-long period. Why did you do it? Was it just to test yourself?
Yeah, a couple different reasons. One, I had I had competed against Kanan in the past, and we had like a kind of close match in a I think maybe it was a Naga or Grappler's Quest or something like that. I made a few mistakes, lost by a lot of points. And I had already had a match with JT, which was one of their guys at a point in time, 0-0 decision in Abu Dhabi trials. So I just felt very put down by their team at that point in time, you know, like, oh, damn, these freaking Lloyd Irvin guys, you know what I mean? Like, I think he even had some matches with DJ up at that point too, where, you know, like some matches I lost by like an advantage or something. So just at a certain point, you get frustrated. I'm just like, you know, that enticed me for sure. Just being like, okay, you know, here's a chance, sub only, you know, now it's, you know, for sure, you know, who's jiu-jitsu's best at this point, you know, who's going to submit the guy. So I felt like I had the best, you know, opportunity to kind of make a comeback there in those terms, but also because it was just a great opportunity. I felt like in terms of, you know, the biggest thing I was asked to do at that point in time, you know, money was involved, and, you know, I had to pull some strings. I was in college at the time. I had to take a lot of my finals immediately after and finish up a lot of my projects before I left, and I had to talk to all my teachers and things, and I had to clear it with them. I was like doing projects throughout the week, like at night at a McDonald's near Seth Smith's house, who I was staying at for the week. So interesting experience. But yeah, I think it was to test myself and because a little bit of a grudge, you know, with the team at the time, for sure.
Right. And the next place that a lot of people saw you was at ADCC 2013. You had an awesome performance there.
Yes.
And you competed more than we expected you to, because they pulled you out of the crowd during the absolute matches. How was China and competing in ADCC?
China was an interesting experience. You know, just being a part of Abu Dhabi was amazing. So I can't make any complaints there. I think there's probably better places that maybe could have the venue could have been put on, but it's cool to have it all around the world. You know, I don't think there was any other reason that I would ever travel to China. So that, you know, I probably would never have seen it had ADCC not been there. So that was a cool experience. But in terms of ADCC in general, yeah, it was awesome. I was so glad that I got a chance to you know, what I didn't know going into the event was that you had to get picked for the absolute. So I was just happy that I got picked to be involved in the absolute, and then to get pulled out of the crowd again when somebody got hurt was really cool. But in general, you know, that was again another point in my career where that's boom, this is the biggest stage that you've ever had to compete in. This is the biggest tournament. This is and essentially that's the pinnacle of the sport, you know, at this point in time. You know, aside from like some super fights and things, you know, in terms of the tournament style format, ADCC is the ultimate in terms of no-gi grappling, and some would even venture as much to say in grappling in general, because there's so many different styles mixed in that they bring together to compete at one event. So yeah, I was really pumped, and I think the Quran match and stuff went Went well, not as well as it could have gone. There's a lot of mistakes that I made. I attribute most of what happened in that match to myself. There were some outside forces involved, but for the most part, all on me.
The last minute of that match was absolutely. I mean, the whole match was amazing.
Sure.
But the last minute, Kron really turned it around. Do you think that was a strength on his part or a weakness on your part?
A little bit of both. I think it clearly shows that Kron is a seasoned competitor. You see a lot of guys, and I talked to my professor Tom about this. I had been competing with many guys, up until that point, especially in the brown belt divisions and people that weren't necessarily complete professionals in the sport yet, where you would get to a certain point in a match and you would break somebody mentally. You get to a point where you either have somebody's back or you're up on enough points or you have them in enough of a compromising position that it just seemed like a knife through butter at a certain point with how the rest of the match would go. And I think I got to a point like that where I thought I was going to get to with Kron, where I had his back and I switched triangles. I was up by a considerable number of points. I think at 6 points at one point. And I was a little bit in the back of my head at that point in time. I was like, wow, you're here. And I always took myself outside the moment instead of staying in the moment. And I think he capitalized on that, as opposed to me just really aggressively going for the finish right away as soon as I had his back. I think there was definitely a little bit of a moment of hesitation there. So, I think he capitalized a little bit on my weakness, but it also shows his strength in that, he is a seasoned competitor and he knew what to do in that situation. He knew there was opportunity to win. And that's how I feel that I compete as well. I try anyway, to make sure that no matter how bad of a position I'm in, I'm still not demoralizing myself in my own head, and I'm pushing forward to finish and know that there's a chance that I could win no matter what the circumstances. Because if you look at that match, I started out, mounted with my arms above my head. Mm-hmm. So talk about turning a negative into a positive for sure. So,
right. Are there any skills that you use to develop that mental strength you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that of all my coaches that I've had, I'm part of, Tom DeBlas's school, which is Ocean County Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he got his black belt from Ricardo Almeida, who got his black belt from Renzo Gracie, and I'm involved with all the different schools, and I've been taught by them and many of their instructors. And of all of them, I think the person that I've worked with the most that has developed my mental strength the absolute best, and I've seen him do it with other people as well, was Tom DeBlas. And he's an excellent coach, he's excellent at jiu-jitsu, but I think his biggest strength was helping develop us mentally. Before he really started believing that I could do well, or telling me that he believed that I could do well, I don't think I really believed in my really believed. Like, we say like, oh yeah, I could win, whatever, but really in my head saying, yeah, I could do whatever, I could be the best at jiu-jitsu. I didn't really believe that until he believed in me a little bit. And then, that helped me push forward. And then eventually it becomes a point where you're self-motivated. And that's tough to achieve. Self-motivation is something that I think a lot of people strive for, but many people lack. And that's why I think jiu-jitsu is such an amazing thing for people, because, you go into this group format where you have other people around you to help push you and help motivate you, whereas you could go to the gym and it's all self-motivation reliant. There's nobody that's calling you up on the phone, hey man, where you at? We've been missing you in training, whatever the case may be. So just having a family and a group of people that also cared about the similar things that I cared about, and a team that helped bring me to that point. There's always that to think about mentally that brings me back to that point, why I would be stronger mentally. But also it's something you work on by putting yourself in bad spots in training. If you constantly in training are fighting to be dominant, oh, I'm going to hide my arms so I can't get arm barred. Oh, I'm going to make sure I'm postured so I never get triangled. Well, if you're always doing that and you're never getting put in bad situations, it's going to be rough when you do get put in a bad situation, and it's going to be a challenge mentally. You should be challenging yourself mentally in the gym all the time, so that when it happens on the mats in competition, you're ready.
Garry, let's talk about gi and no-gi for a while. You've
Sure.
competed, certainly more recently, much more in no-gi. Is that something you've always preferred, or has it been more 50-50?
It's an interesting question. A lot of people ask me this because I think mainstream, jiu-jitsu practitioners, and it's always, been taught, I think, since the beginning that, like, you need to get your start in the gi and get good in the gi, and then the guys that are good in the gi are going to be good without the gi, whatever the case may be. When you take the gi off, nothing really changes. And I think you're seeing more and more of a divergence of that. Obviously, people can be successful in both, and grappling is grappling, all right? You have judo, you have wrestling, you have, jiu-jitsu, whatever the case may be, no-gi grappling. And all of them are grappling martial arts. So of course you could succeed. There's a little bit of cross success, but of course you would get to a point now in the sport, because the sport's relatively young, where you get a little bit more specific training for one or the other, where it may help you succeed a little bit better at one as opposed to the other. But nonetheless, for me, I think that it just kind of happened. I just happened to be better suited for no-gi competition. Every time I competed, I just had more success. The first championship I ever won was, bigger championship I ever won was in the gi, blue belt division as a juvenile. So, I was always in love with the gi. I was always training in the gi. Even at my academy, I still teach 7 days a week in the gi. But I just noticed in competition, just success rate was so much higher without the gi, just based on my style and the things that I do. Maybe it's the techniques that I do. Maybe it's the way that I move, whatever the case may be. And when that starts to happen, as you get more and more professional, people ask you to do no-gi events. So now I'm training for these events. I really don't have a choice. Now at this point, it's like I get asked to do, 10 no-gi events a year or whatever, and I got to train for them. So I don't really have much of a choice. I can't really work on the gi as much anymore. It doesn't make as much sense,
Right. And you already mentioned it, but a lot of instructors, gi instructors, will say you got to have the gi even if you want to be good at no-gi. And sometimes I wonder, is that just a marketing term because you want to build your gi customer base? But you are a product of the gi.
Absolutely.
So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think my first maybe 5 years of solid training, maybe even venture to say 5.5, were pretty much 100% gi training. Aside from maybe no-gi worlds or no-gi pans was popping up, we'd train just without the gi, every night, but other than that, then those were only a couple month periods, so we're talking 5.5 years of just solid gi training, and then, finally finding out that, no-gi happens to be a little, bit better for me. But I think, John always talks to us, John Danaher talks to us about this too, is just grappling is grappling, it's all within the same realm of sport, and then it's just a little bit of specialization. So, you could continue to train in the gi and get really good in the gi and then, kind of make that crossover to no-gi grappling, but it's going to be a little bit of specific training to get you there. Just like if I was going to prepare for a gi competition now, if I was going to be successful, I would need to take, a few months, maybe, several months to really narrow in on that sport-specific training that I needed for that event.
If a teenager came to you and said, Garry, I want you to get me to be a no-gi world champion.
Yes.
Within 10 years.
Yes.
Would you have him train at all in the gi?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think it broadens your creativity. Not so much necessarily just gi and no-gi training, but just the more things that you're able to do, the more different types of grappling that you train. Like I work with a wrestling coach. I try to work with I don't get as much work because, like you said, I'm mostly without the gi, with some judo guys, wrestlers and no-gi grappling and fighters and all different kinds of people. It makes you more creative because everybody expresses their martial arts in a little bit of a different way depending on what they focus on. So I would definitely tell them to train in the gi because it's just going to help them become more creative and more understanding of martial arts in general, grappling martial arts in general, as they progress. So I wouldn't say you have to train in the gi 7 days a week, but I definitely would say, like, if you're purposefully just never showing up to gi classes, there's a problem there. You know what I mean? That's additional grappling training that you could be doing that you're missing out on just because you happen to be wearing the gi. Right.
Let's flip this around. I find that guys that train both are usually the most well-rounded. Guys that only train gi, I think, lack a couple aspects of it. But I'm curious, what's your take? If you're training with guys that never train no gi, what do you feel they are lacking, if anything?
Well, it's just a little bit. It's minor positioning details. Learning how to use underhooks and overhooks. And collar ties and things as opposed to your grips because they're just not there. If someone just solely trains in the gi and never trains no gi, I would imagine that they would struggle a little bit in those aspects, unless, of course, their style in the gi happens to use underhooks, overhooks, etc., because they can be replaced by grips. So it really depends on how the person studies. Like, for instance, in my school, the way that I teach, because I'm so no-gi specific in my training and my competition, many of the things that I teach in the gi are very no-gi oriented.
So you're not doing spider guard and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, we'll teach it for sure, but there's not as much of a focus on that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? If I'm going to teach things from people being on bottom, many times I don't use as many of the grips. I'll go into it. I believe that as an instructor, it's your responsibility to try and teach as much of a broad look at jiu-jitsu as possible and not just focus on the things that you're good at, because I think it takes away from some of your students' abilities to get better, because not everybody's the same grappler. But yeah, of course, there's a little bit less focus on that sort of thing because it's not my strong suit and I don't feel as confident teaching it. But I have other people in the school, some instructors that are coming up that did take a liking to those sort of techniques, and they're very good at it, and they help build the school in that particular direction. Another reason why when people start disappearing from the gym when the head instructor's gone, that's crazy to me, because I can't tell you how many times I would show up when my head instructor wasn't there or somebody else wasn't there and a different guy was teaching, and I learned something that I never would have learned from that instructor, because it's just a completely different style of technique, different view on jiu-jitsu, different point in their career. A blue belt is going to teach you different details in an arm lock than a black belt will ever teach you for the most part, because they're at a different stage. I'm focusing on different things as a black belt because I have certain things down in muscle memory than a blue belt would be focusing on. So super important to be able to do that.
What's one technique or position that just never fit in your game?
Never fit. Well, it's funny because there's so many things that I realize now, like as I'm a black belt, that I kind of said, oh, this doesn't fit. And now, like, it's one of my main things. Like, for instance, guillotines. Never was a guillotine guy, couldn't do them really, did them too, and it's funny because our team too, like Renzo Gracie team, Ricardo Almeida team is pretty much known for guillotines and their guillotine work. I never really was making them work for me in my game and competition and training, whatever the case may be. And now as I progressed and I became a black belt and started competing and things and working with John a little bit, I realized that it's a very strong technique, and I've worked it into my game in a way that, whether it's points or not points, I can make it work. But I mean, I'm trying to think. I would definitely say, like we said, like some of the more sport-specific things, like Berimbolo, for instance, never really meshed with my game. I know how to do them relatively. Know how to. I've encountered them in training and things, and know how to deal with them defensively and things. But it never really fit to me as like a technique that I was going to focus on, because again, it's more focused on grips. Right. than I'm usually accustomed to using. So some of those things, I tend to stick to more stuff that works in a more broader sense in grappling, whether it's gi and no gi, whatever the case may be.
Right. So let's talk about Metamours.
Yeah.
You saved the show. You had the one submission of the night. So thank you for that. What was your feeling going into that match, and did it pan out the way you expected? Yeah,
so they did a little post-fight interview afterwards, and were asking me kind of a similar question. My mentality going into it was a little stronger than last time, only because when I start in a new event, whatever it is, especially when they're like the more promoted events, the bigger events and things like that, the moment I step on the mats in a new situation, like for instance, the first time I did an IBJJF competition, everything's new around you, the people are new around you, officials, the style, everything is different. So it's a little bit of a shock. You feel a little bit anxious. You don't feel comfortable in your environment. And, normally when we're training, we're used to being comfortable in our environment. It's a place we go every single day, maybe multiple times a day. So you feel comfortable, you're at ease with your nerves, everything. But when you walk into a new environment and you're expected to do the same thing, you get a little bit anxious. So being involved with a similar environment like I was for the first Metamours, I felt a little bit more relaxed walking out, as opposed to, the first Metamours that I did where, I know I had a pretty good result in the first Metamours that I did as well, but I definitely felt a little bit more anxious walking out and being around people. It just was a completely different crowd of people that I was used to working with, and a different event, and a different setup and everything. So everything was new. And fighters, and I think martial artists and many athletes in general, like to have their sort of habits, their habitual things that they do, and so that they can stay comfortable and feel like they create that comfortable environment around them. It's tougher to do that when you walk into a brand new environment,
You mentioned nerves, and that's a question that a lot of people have, especially new competitors. How have you managed to deal with your nerves?
Well, it's just for me. I started grappling, I guess I should say, when I was in 5th grade. I did it from 5th to 9th grade. I did wrestling, so I should consider that a grappling martial art. And I think that kind of readied me for the idea of being able to compete with people, in front of people, whatever the case may be. I was always relatively comfortable with that. But I think that combined with how much I competed at blue and purple belts, and just really strive to test myself as much as possible. I think the more you do anything, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. And I think that's the biggest thing. Is I think people kind of look at competition and they see some of the better guys and they're like, they lose their first competition or maybe their first 3 competitions and they're like, oh man, I'll never be as good as this guy, but as good as that guy, whatever. But I think the most successful people in the sport are just the people that stick with it. That famous saying, a black belt is just a white belt that never quit. It pretty much remains true, especially in a competitive sense too. I've seen so many talented people just be not successful for a period of time and then just not be into it anymore, not want to do it, or maybe they stick with jiu-jitsu but they don't want to compete anymore. And I think that's a big part of it, is just consistently challenging yourself, and you might not always succeed, but you're going to learn from those challenges and you're going to make adjustments, and that's what this is all about, any athletic performance,
Right. Garry, let's talk about the jiu-jitsu lifestyle.
Yeah.
What should people know about your lifestyle? What do you do on a daily basis? How do you pay the bills?
Yeah.
What's the life of a grappling superstar like yourself?
Yeah, we're kind of a little bit like hobos. We have like our all of our stuff that we need to live holed up in the back of our car, and all of our clothes. I rarely fold laundry. All of my stuff just goes into my car, and I do my laundry in my bathtub sometimes because the laundromat's not open. Things like that. A little bit crazy. So. It just, a lot of moving around, a lot of training at different facilities and traveling for training and things. And then, I basically train because I teach at night. So it's a little different, than most people's profession. Most people have, your 9 to 5 or whatever the case may be job. Well, I'm starting at 5, in terms of what I actually do for a living, teaching, right? So by the time I actually have to teach, I had already trained the whole day for the most part. Got up early in the morning, did a early morning session, an afternoon session, and then I travel from wherever that is back to my gym and then coach. So it's a pretty full day. For instance, like Wednesdays, I even do Rutgers Jiu-Jitsu Club. I teach at that. It's just part of their little program. And on a Wednesday, that's right after I teach at my school. So the day actually winds up taking me about a 22 hour day or so, something like that. It's from the time when I actually go to sleep, wake up, and then go to sleep again. It's insane. So I love it though. I wouldn't have it any other way. Busy is always good. If I'm not busy, it means, I'm probably not working hard enough, or, I'm not taking advantage of all the opportunities that are in front of me. So that's kind of the lifestyle, just constant moving around, not a lot of time to do other things. Every time for these Metamoris promos, they send these guys out to my house, to do the video and stuff. And they're like, what are your hobbies? What are your hobbies? And I'm like, I don't really have any hobbies besides jiu-jitsu. I know it's my profession, but sure, there's some things that I do to fool around on a day-to-day basis, but none of it is stuff that I could really focus on because I'm just so focused on jiu-jitsu. So, that's my love and my hobby is jiu-jitsu. So that's really mostly what I focus on. And that and grappling and martial arts in general. I do some wrestling and judo and things like that as well.
Right. So paid jiu-jitsu events have come a long way. Of course, if you're Cyborg and you're winning the Absolute of the ADCC, you're making some good money.
Sure.
Abu Dhabi Pro as well. But for the guys like you who are not quite at the Absolute winning status, you're not that big, so you have a little less of a chance. But
we'll see.
You came close. But is it feasible for you, for a grappler out there, to make a living competing in professional events, or do you have to supplement it with teaching?
For grapplers right now, in jiu-jitsu, it's very, very difficult. Maybe a few people might be able to make a living out of it, but it wouldn't be sustainable in terms of having a family or anything like that. They might be able to make a living out of it, kind of living out of their car like I do, just by themselves with no family or anything like that. They might be able to survive and buy gear and do what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. But for the most part, to live a more comfortable life and, be able to support someone more than just yourself, I think it's almost necessary to have a school, teach at a school full-time, and supplement with, doing seminars and privates and things like that. That's what really makes it a sustainable living for now. I mean, we're getting on the right track. We're doing things like Metamoris and EBI and these other, and Dream Jiu-Jitsu is doing, they're doing all these professional events where, we're finally becoming more paid professionals. Even IBJJF is finally branching out into, paying some of their professional athletes, which is awesome. So we're moving in the right direction, but we just haven't had the traction yet from sponsors and the people that need to be involved to make it something where we could make a living,
Last few quick questions.
Just competing. Yeah.
The thing you hate about training.
The thing I hate about training.
What's one aspect that you don't like?
Oh, okay. There's a lot of things I hate about training. Many days in training, I spend my time and talking to my training partners about all the things we could be dedicating time to that actually would be way more useful. I had a conversation with Flavio Almeida one time, and we're just talking, and he's like, it's pretty funny that we dedicated all of our time and got really good at something that nobody really cares about. So that's kind of how you feel about the sport now. It's growing for sure, but we do sit down quite frequently, and as some of the professional grapplers, and say, like, we put so much time into this. Like, if we put this much time into something that, like, people actually care about, we could actually, like, make a living. Like, we'd actually have money and, like, a place to live, But no, for sure. Like, but like the hardest, I guess that's like the thing I hate about training sometimes, but I love it at the same time, is that there's such a unequal, like, not risk reward. What's the words I'm looking for? Like, the amount you put in versus the amount that you get out of it is so unbalanced. I like that, and I hate it in a sense that, like, you could push so hard to, like, do something for months and months at a time, only to learn a small, portion of something,
right.
A little bit of a technique or a whole technique, whatever the case may be. Just get a little bit better, a little bit stronger after, months of preparation or months of training, whatever the case may be. And it could also, you could completely fail, you could go prepare for an event and spend so much time preparing and just, not succeed at all. That's probably the most frustrating thing that an athlete deals with, because not everybody is winning gold, obviously. Right. You know what I mean? Not everybody's on the podium. Not everybody's competing in the big super fight or whatever the case may be. So that's the most frustrating thing, I think. But, it keeps you going. And I think it makes you humble, and it makes me feel good to know that, I work hard for, what I'm getting. So, I think that's a good answer, maybe. I don't know.
Absolutely. Now, on a more positive note, what's your most favorable moment in your memory in your grappling career?
It's tough. But my favorite memory in my grappling career is also the worst memory in my grappling career. Once again, I think that this is one of those sports where, especially when you're in the mats and you're like, when you're talking about things, we constantly interchange adjectives that are negative and positive. Oh, that was sick, or that was awesome, but we're also like, oh, that was terrible. Almost meaning a positive thing. Oh, that looked terrible, like a real nasty armbar or something like that. I think in our martial art, that happens all the time. But same thing happened to me. Basically, I walked in, and this is about 3 months starting training at Tom DeBlas's school, Ocean County Jiu-Jitsu. And I had previously trained a little bit at like a smaller MMA gym for a couple months. And this is like 6 months prior to me walking in there. So I'm 3 months into training at Tom's place, and I like tried to escape a triangle or something, and I didn't quite get out or something. And I like asked Tom like what he thought like I should do. And then after he explained himself, fool that I was, arrogant young child that I was, I decided to say, oh, well, we learned it this way at the old school. And then I proceeded to get the crap kicked out of me for like 35 minutes. Like just the most brutal, there was the first most, it's funny because Tom was the most brutal beating that I've ever gotten in jiu-jitsu that day. And then Flavio Almeida was the second when he was preparing for like Pan Am's, I think. I was just like mounted and like had both my arms over my head. Just like, why am I here? But anyway, there was one of those days. And every 5 minutes he would ask me, do you want to stop? And I was just like, no. because I felt like I didn't really get what I deserved yet until he was done, you know? So for like 35 minutes, I had like a bruise on my sternum and like gi burn all over I was like 15 years old. Tom's like, what I did to you is illegal. He's like, for sure, I should have got arrested for that. But no, but like it made me better as a person. And, you know, a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think it's crazy that grapplers do things like that, and you hear stories like that. But you know, it made me better as a person. I was young and impressionable, and what I gained from that was just more respect and discipline, and realizing that, you know, that if I wanted to get good and stuff, I was going to have to work hard, and that there was going to be a lot of pain and suffering involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So, you know, Garry, we've both been training for a long time, and but sometimes I hear things that I'm surprised that I'd never heard before, or something maybe I heard before, but suddenly it'll click, you know, years later. If you could go back, is there anything that you've heard that would have helped you out if you would have heard it long before?
Ooh, so many things. I think like it's, you know, when you're training and you're like a purple belt or a blue belt, you hear black belts be like, oh yeah, well when you get your black belt, that's when it really begins. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. They're just saying that. And then like I get to black belt and I realized that like I really knew nothing, you know. I had a game based on like half guard and like a rear naked choke, and that was really all I did. You know, I took people's backs and maybe swept them or whatever until I could get to the back and rear naked choke, and that's really all I had. But like at the time, as I was coming up, I was like, you know, I thought that was all there was. You know, I was like, that's going to be the pinnacle of what I do. You know, that's my strategy. And since then, I've brought into so many other submissions and really tried to work on so many other things and other parts of my game. It's like every other week almost now as a black belt that I hear something that I was like, damn, I've been doing this wrong forever. Like this would have saved me so much, saved me so much trouble. I can't really pinpoint a moment.
Right.
There's been so many different techniques where you have that aha moment where you're like, if I would have known this, you know, it wouldn't have taken me 6 months to learn how to do this move. It wouldn't have taken me 40 years to learn how to do this move. So, I can't really pinpoint anything.
Right.
Sorry. I wish. I'm not. You know, I know that you guys are looking for these little cheat codes to get better at jiu-jitsu. You people watching, but there's no cheat codes, guys.
Right.
You know, it's just going to take time, and that's what you got to learn.
Yeah. Okay, last question before we go to the mats. Your goals for the future? I'm sure you want to be an ADCC champion, maybe gi world champion too.
Yeah, I plan to compete in the gi. I'm gonna try. You know, it all depends on, you know, what other training coincides with gi season, like when Worlds comes around and things. If I have other events that I have to prepare for without the gi and I'm getting paid professionally, like I really have no choice but to focus on those events. But for sure, I have aspirations of doing well in the gi in the future. And whether it's this year, next year, you know, 10 years down the line, for sure it's a goal of mine. You know, I have goals in a multitude of grappling martial arts. So I feel as though, you know, that's going to be a big one because, you know, for right now I've only proven myself without the gi, and I think it's an important thing to learn. It's just another tool that you have to use, the gi, you know. So I have plans for that. ADCC, just like you said, you know, whether I haven't gotten any information on whether or not I'm going to get an invite to ADCC, so we'll see. I'm going to probably do the trials. I might let my student do the trials in East Coast. I might come to the West Coast, so we'll see what happens with all that. But either way, I plan to be there, plan to win. You know, who knows? I don't know if Kron's going to be there or if we're going to fight in Metamoris beforehand. Who knows? So hopefully, at some point, I get to fight him. I don't know. And then MMA starts soon. You know, starting to kind of branch out into that field and see where I'm going. I already started a lot of wrestling training, and now it's just the striking that I got to kind of fill in the gaps with. And we'll see a little bit of that in the future, hopefully, you know, see how it goes. And it's the same sort of thing. I'm just going to have to stick with it for a long period of time before I feel like I'm ready, and then you'll see me out there fighting one day, I guess.
Nice. What's the next competition you have lined up?
Next competition, it'll either be ADCC trials on the 15th, or maybe 13th in West Virginia. I'm not 100% sure if I'll be competing that, or possibly some super fight sort of thing that we have hooked up for either December or February. I believe Rose Gracie called and said she wanted me to fight her husband.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know if I was supposed to release that information.
Well, there we go.
But oh well, it's out of the bag now. She didn't say anything that I couldn't, so oh well. So that's going to happen. February maybe, December. I got to take a look at the email. So we'll see. But yeah, that you can look forward for. I think at Gracie Nationals. So if you know whenever that is, that's when it'll be. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So if people want to get in contact with you, where can they find you online?
Everywhere. You can find me on all the social media outlets. Pretty much everything is done underneath my name or my name with an underscore in between it, you know, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, whatever the case may be. Just like to thank a few people. You know, thanks so much for my main sponsors, OTM. They were always, you know, supported me. And for everybody that helped me out at Metamoris, Progress Jiu-Jitsu, Dream Jiu-Jitsu, Jiu-Jitsu, and probably missing somebody, Roll Junkie, and obviously OTM, like I said before. But thanks so much for that. And also, I banged on the table like I wasn't supposed to. Thanks so much for that. And also my teammates. I already said thank you to you guys during the interview, but you know, I couldn't do any of this without you guys and all my coaches. So thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate Budo Videos for having me on here.
Great having you, Garry. And on that note, let's go to the mats.
When my partner attempts to do different things like Darce choke me from half guard, I'll rotate the arm through and start to try and pass through my partner's back. All right, I'll do a little hip bump into my partner, a little bridge. All right, my hips pop out, just enough room to dig that butterfly hook in.